Hello, YouTube family and friends. Welcome back to my channel, my YouTube family. Thank you for being here again. So, I'm doing another episode of Awakening into the Void. I believe this is episode 18, if I'm correct. Hopefully, I am. Um, so, my last video, I got into just this trip that I took to Miami, and the specific detail that I wanted to share was I mean, I didn't have to make a whole video about it, but I did, and it is what it is. But this time I'm just going to keep telling the story about, moving houses and the things that would follow that. And you know, as I tell my story, like, not everything is going to involve my spiritual awakening or like um, spiritual matters, but I feel like all of this story is important because it all um, contributes to me becoming more aware of energy and my particular energy and how I interface with other people, and just learning more about emotional intelligence as well, and awakening to my own emotional intelligence and recognizing different personality traits and different personality ailments, shall I say, deficiencies in character, things that I was just not awakened to until I started becoming more aware and just really connecting to my feelings and connecting how particular people were making me feel, or not, I won't say making me feel, were triggering me to feel. Um, no one can make you feel any kind of way. We are responsible, especially once we become aware, we are responsible for how we feel. So, making other people responsible for how you feel is definitely a lower state of emotional intelligence, but it's something that is being acquired. These learnings are being acquired in this age of Aquarius, in this age and time. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and begin. So, as I was mentioning in my video before last, we were moving houses, and it was just a stressful event because there was so many things that we had to move. And the house that we were moving into was in the same neighborhood, and it was being rented out by this young couple. It was their first property, and they didn't really know much about being landlords. They were on their way to move into another place that they had bought, and so they were young and new landlords, and basically were using their parents as their guide through this entire process. And it was great that one of the requirements to move into the place was to have renter's insurance, and this is an important factor for future reference, but that was just a requirement in moving into the place. So before we wanted to even move anything into the house, they had to move out. And when we were kind of inspecting the house before moving in, we just noticed like it was a complete disaster. Like, there was dog hairs, pug hairs everywhere, all over the house. It was freaking disgusting. Like, just, it was nasty. Like, these people were nasty. I'm just going to say that. Like, just maybe their parents never taught them how to clean up after themselves. I know how a lot of people are like that in this world, just nasty as heck, but they would definitely qualify as those kind of people. And it was just a mess. The walls, there was paint on the walls that, the colors were just horrendous. So I had to paint all the walls. That was kind of my task, was to get the house ready to move in. And so, yeah, there was a lot of painting that needed to be done, a lot of deep cleaning that needed to be done. It was a lot of work. So we got all of that done and started moving into the house. And it was just a lengthy process. It was really stressful. And again, my sister was in her teenage years. She was starting to go to school too, because she'd been homeschooled up until that point. And so it was just really stressful dealing with the loss of our dad, the stress of myself. I still wasn't good at processing my emotions, and I was I would lash out at her, or her emotions would trigger my emotions, and we would get into it a lot, she and I, even though we have a 10-year difference. Like, my maturity would take a hit, or my sense of maturity that I thought I had would be triggered by her, teenage angst, and we would get into it. And so I know that that wasn't helping her at all. And my stepmom was stressed out too. So it was just a bunch of stressful people trying to manage and work things out in this space. Um, so that was just heavy on all of us. And also, I was still trying to maintain a long distance relationship with this guy who I didn't learn until later had his own, personality faults and issues. And I will not call myself perfect, but we did have an age difference. So I feel like oftentimes with that, the older person will have an advantage in some ways, and it can fall into some lines of, manipulation and just, you know, control issues and stuff like that. So that was weighing heavy on me, trying to manage, and maintain the situation that was not in proximity to me. Looking back, that was a bit of a blessing. But something that kept coming up was, considering we were so far apart, was that, he wanted to, he was polyamorous, as I mentioned in another video, and he wanted to open the relationship. He's like, we're not in the same place. It would just be easier if we, maybe, he was just encouraging me, like, why don't you see other people? Why don't you start talking to other people? And I was just like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's just not my thing. I don't know why you're pushing this on me. And it was just, it kind of took a blow at my self-esteem, because I knew that's what he wanted. And so he was trying to push that idea onto me, so that if I'm doing, being free and going out there and meeting people, then he could do the same thing too. So I was very resistant from that. And while I was working at the wine and cheese store where I was living, just so happens one day, somebody walked in, and this interesting character, he was dressed very nicely, like suit and tie kind of attire, but it was very sharp. Like, you could tell it was like a custom suit that he was wearing. And he was just very focused on whatever he was doing, just very in his own world. And he came to my station where I was at, and I kind of stopped him in his tracks, because I was like, oh my God, you look so great. Like, I don't ever see anybody dressed so precisely, like so pristine and on point and kind of in their own element, and it kind of racially ambiguous. So that too was kind of a draw for me. And I could tell he was kind of struck by my presence, and we just made eye contact and just started talking. And at the time I was getting started with my art business, and I started painting on apparel, and that was kind of what I was going to use as my in to start having materials, like having inventory to sell to demonstrate the kind of art that I did. And so we started talking about fashion. It just came up, and I think because I complimented him on his outfit, and we just talked for a little bit, and we exchanged social media, and then he left, carried on with his day, and kind of forgot all about it. Um, but it was important for me because I was still new to the town. I didn't know anybody. I had met one girl and we hung out maybe once, but that friendship wasn't really, it was moving slow. And I was kind of hanging out with people at work, but it was very surface level, and I like to go deep with people. Like, I really like to try to get to know people on a deeper level. So that was important to me. Um, and this guy, he just looked really interesting. So it's like, oh, maybe we'll catch up one day, or, be able to have more chats about fashion and just both of our interests. He said that he was a designer, and I'm really interested in other people who are in the field that I want to get into. So he ended up adding me in social media, and we never really talked through there, but that was kind of my way of being able to kind of investigate who this person was just a little bit. Like, one thing about me is that I'm not very intrusive on people. Like, I'd rather them tell me about themselves than me to do research on people. Like, I find that very odd, the whole, people who are like, oh, they be Googling people that they want to go on a date with, or people that they want to hang out with, or people they want to befriend, or whatever. And I don't know, I just think that shit's weird. Like, I don't feel like prying into people's space like that, because again, like, how are you going to learn about someone unless they're a criminal or some sort? Like, that's kind of need to know information. You can't really learn much about a person from what you're going to see online. It's just one dimension of a person, in my opinion. And I don't know. That's just stalkerish to me as well. Like, I'm not into that kind of shit. So, excuse the loud noise. There's still construction going on next door. I don't know if it sounds loud over here, but we'll see when I investigate the tape. Um, so, yeah, I met this fella. Very interesting seeming. And it was just ironic because I meet him at the same time when, my guy was telling me, like, go out there, meet other people. It's cool. I'm fine with it. Blah, blah, blah. And, I was still in my mid-20s. So I was young and kind of dumb, Science says that our brain doesn't really fully develop until we're like 24, 25, So I just didn't have the know-how as far as navigating a situation where I would be entertaining more than one fella. So I eventually heard from this guy, and it was just strange timing, like, I wasn't doing much that evening, and he prompted me to come visit him. And I was like, I mean, okay, like, where do you live? He's just like, just take a cab to my place. We can hang out, we could chat, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, show me where you live, And he sent me his location, and it was like 20, 30 minutes, almost 30 minutes away in the middle of nowhere, seemingly. I was like, what the hell? Like, I was like, I'm not made of money, and I don't really have the funds to take a cab all the way out to where you are. And again, my young mindedness, even though I was very adventurous, in my younger years, I used to be a lot more fuckless and always down for some crazy adventure, no matter how dangerous it could potentially be. Um, but he said, don't worry about it. Just get a cab. I'll pay for it when they get here. And I said, all right, okay. I don't know this fool, but I'm down for adventure. I'm going to do it. So I got a cab and gave the driver the address, and the cab driver was a little odd. He was definitely talking me up, and um looking back on it, he took like a really long route to get to the address, probably so he could talk to me for a long time. Like, it shouldn't have taken as long as it took, but it did. Um, but eventually we arrived at the place, and this place is in the woods. It was dark. The road to get there was like super dark. There's no street lights. It's a country road. There's like woods all around, big ass trees, and where we lived is not necessarily a foresty place, but this particular area was kind of foresty. So I was like, where the fuck are we? um then the guy, he came and met us out in the front of the property, and he was dressed nicely, like on a more casual vibe. He didn't have like the suit and stuff. He was just more casual, but still very like nice clothes. And his body language is very closed off. Like, he stands like this a lot, like with his arms in front of his chest. And um to me now, with that kind of body language, it's like you're very shut off in a particular way, or very self-protective, and especially you're crossing your arms over your heart space. So that's kind of like a very guarded position to be in, and that was a stance that he had a lot. And so he greeted me, and he was kind of like sneering at the cab driver because he felt that the cab driver took me on this kind of drive just to converse with me or whatever. And I wasn't paying attention. I didn't know the area. I didn't even know where the fuck we were going. So I didn't have the intelligence or awareness to know what was going on. But he paid the cab driver, and then we went inside, and it was a rather interesting evening that we had. We chatted, and I decided to turn my phone off, or I turned it on silent. I just really wanted to, get to know this person and have like a really deep one-on-one interaction with this person. And it was really interesting. Like, he's super inquisitive and asked a lot of questions, and very observant, very intelligent, very spiritual, which kind of caught me off guard. We talked a little bit about fashion, but more so we were just talking about life, and talking about what other people call conspiracy theories, the occult. And we talked about a lot of stuff. It was a really interesting time. And what I remember specifically about that evening was it was just a really interesting energy that was cultivated between the two of us. And there was literally like a glow in the space as we were like chatting and getting to know each other. And I was fully enjoying myself. Like, it was really nice. I was really interested, really intrigued by this person. Um, I don't know if this is particularly important, but I was unsure of his sexual orientation. He just was very kind of metrosexual, and I'm not really good at reading those kinds of things with people. Um, And I think that that kind of was something that let my guard down, because had he been like a hyper masculine character, I think I would have been a lot more guarded than I was, you know. Um, and so I definitely had my guard down with this individual. And that evening, we ended up consuming some magical mushrooms together. And so, I mean, these are all red flags on my part. Like, what the fuck are you doing, young girl? Like, you go out into the woods to this random guy's house in a cab at night with some random fool, like, taking you out to the woods. You don't know where you're going. Like, you don't know who this fool is. Like, what are you doing? And then you eat drugs with this fool, you know? Like, it was just a lot that I got myself into this evening. But it turned out fine. Like, we ate mushrooms and then we were really going deep. Like, it was very magical. It was a really, really magical time. And I ended up staying the night there. I slept on the couch and he slept in his room. And the next day, he took me back to town. So the next day, he drove me back to town because I had to work, or I think I had to work that day, like that evening or something like that. But it was just really nice. It was really awesome getting to know this person. And I remember looking at my phone because I had it off, or I forget if I had it off or on silent, one of the two. But my guy at the time like called me like 17 to 20 times. Like, it was just, he called me so much that night. And this is where I'm, you know, where I was saying like I didn't know how to navigate like communicating. Like, I don't, I think I did tell him. I told him I was going to be hanging out with a friend, with a new guy friend that I met. And I told him, but I wasn't going to be like checking in with him or anything like that. I just said, this is what I'm doing. But I just thought it was interesting that he hit me up so many times. And this is the same guy that was like pushing and encouraging, like, see other people, put yourself out there, you know, do this. And you know, the minute I meet another guy and we're hanging out, like, he's just bugging. He's completely bugging, just calling me nonstop. And so yeah, that was that was pretty interesting. Um, but this character, he's very integral in my spiritual growth and awakening. And I feel that, you know, everyone we meet and interact with in our lifetimes is for a purpose, for a lesson, for support, for growth, expansion, whatever. And I won't necessarily call him a bad person, but there was, our connection did take a turn for the worse at one point, and I'll get into that in another video. But upon meeting him, he just seemed like a really interesting and fascinating character, and I was incredibly intrigued and incredibly drawn in, sucked in, might I say, to his world and a reality. And I wanted to know more, and I was drawn in. So I'm going to leave the story at that. Still moving, in the process of moving, still trying to get to know people in this new town, and still figuring shit out, still trying to navigate the feelings and emotions of experiencing the loss of a parent. So that leaves one very open and vulnerable. And in that openness, we can be susceptible to characters that don't have the most pure intentions, shall I say. So I will leave that to the next video of my awakening into the void series. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you join me for the next one. Have a good day. Bye.